All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me here today at SOAP. Today, the title of my talk is Rethink Your Screenshots and Tutorials with a Simplified User Interface. And yes, it is about screenshots, it's about tutorials, but it's also about maybe creating better content for our user and making our own life a little bit easier. Can we start the timer on the screen? Perfect. All right, so Gotcha already introduced me, so I don't really have to spend a lot of time on this. My name's Anton Bollen. I live in Berlin. I work for an American company called TechSmith. Most of you might know us through one of those two products, and I know a lot of you are using them. Thank you for that. And I think at this point, we can already go on to the next slide, which is all about SOAP. This is my 4th time at SOAP, and actually the 3rd time speaking, and I'm really happy to be here because, as it says right here, this truly is one of the best content conferences I've ever been to. Not just the knowledge that we're sharing, but also the community, the way we respect each other and the way we encourage to learn from each other without a lot of that corporate BS behind it. And I think that's truly remarkable, which really makes it one of the best content conferences. And what I also really like about the SOAP conference is that every year there is a very strong theme. And last year, I don't know, how many of you were here last year? Yeah, quite a few. Last year we all had a lot of problems and we talked about problems. We solved some of them, but yeah, so this year there's another theme, and this theme is called Innovation versus Simplicity. And I really like this, and actually like this entire paragraph, but there's a few sentences I want to pick out. So let's make them a little bit bigger so we can read them. We want product-related content that is simple to author, deliver, and manage, but we also want product-related content that is easy for our users to follow and to understand. Yeah, and I think that's pretty cool because it's something that, for me, as someone who creates content and who interacts with content on a regular basis, it's part of the common goals that I think a lot of people in this room really have. Yeah, we do want to make our content easier to understand because it will increase user success, will in turn make our products better, and so on and so forth. I don't think this is new because I would imagine most of you have the same goals. But on the other side of the things, on the creation side of from the viewpoint of the writer, the video person, the UA and UX folks, we also want to make the process we have in place for creating this content, for managing this content, easier and more efficient for ourselves, so it's less frustrating, it's more rewarding. Yeah, and so we can see where all of this goes. There's a lot of different types of product-related content, and I want to talk a little bit more about user-focused content, because that's mostly what I interact with. And in our products, we do have a lot of different types of content, especially when it comes to the users in terms of onboarding content. We have help files, training videos, online print guides, in-product tips, and so on and so forth. And this content usually includes, of course, text. We also have technical writers. You know, without text, there wouldn't be much to it. But we also have a lot of visuals. Screenshots, screencasts, other types of videos, animated GIFs. And yeah, I work for a company. We make tools for creating screenshots and screencasts, so it kind of comes with a domain that we spend a lot of time on them, and we create a lot of screenshots and screencasts for our documentation and for our content. But all of you will know that working with these visuals can also introduce a lot of frickin' problems. So we're back to last year's theme, right? So from a trainer perspective, the UI is often distracting and it shows elements that are not actually relevant to what I'm trying to teach. So we spend a lot of time adding arrows and little boxes around the relevant stuff in order to get the user to actually look at option A or B. But then also, as soon as our developers release the next version of a software, crap, right? Things are out of date, we have to go back, updating screenshots, verifying screenshot. That takes a lot of time. And every time you do that, with every UI change, with every new feature, or maybe you even get a build from your developers that's not even done yet, but you can't really get started on your documentation. Those are all problems. That's all, yeah, something I would like for us all to overcome, or at least think about ways we can overcome. And then further, if you're creating these visuals and all of a sudden you're not serving up 1 or 2 languages, but you're serving up 5 or 6 or even more, localizing all that visual content, those screenshots and all that videos is becoming it's becoming a huge task that is also, as we say up here, can be a big problem for many of us in the industry because it takes up too much time and keeps us from focusing on the more exciting things or even developing new, better content. And then we have a software for Mac and Windows, Apple devices, Android devices. A lot of the visual content is very similar, but the screenshots, they're not quite the same, so we end up often essentially retaking the same screenshots on 2 or 3 or 4 devices simply for that purpose. And again, that takes up a lot of time that I'd rather be spending on other things. And so here's our user assistance team. They couldn't be here. I tried to get them to come. There were some travel problems. But yeah, they're waving at you guys. Yeah, so they asked themselves with this particular challenge. So what if we designed the visual content in our tutorials and in our guides to be more user-friendly, so in line with our first goal, but also able to hold up against those UI tweaks and some of these other problems I just showed. And so they started experimenting with something they refer to as Simplified User Interface, pronounced SUI, like a Chewy, Chewbacca, Chewy cookie, yeah? That's how we call it. Maybe you have another name for it. If you do, let me know after this presentation. And what a Simplified User Face or Simplified User Interface graphic is? A Simplified User Interface is a representation of an interface that is focused on the essentials by stripping away temporarily or contextually unimportant elements. And so what does that mean? Well, essentially it means we go from this to this. And I'm sure some of you have seen similar graphics because they're becoming more and more popular. We didn't invent this, we just picked up on it and we kind of ran with it a little bit more. But as you can see, in a simplified user, in a SUI graphic, text is reduced to simple blocks, shapes and graphics are reduced to abstract forms, more text is becoming like that, multiple entries are kind of reduced into a single element, and even the contextual environment, so in this case it's a browser, we even simplified that in this example. So really, yeah, we don't really know what this is, but at the same time, I think all of you would recognize this as being the SOAP website because you've all been to that website, and so you know the context, and so you can identify what this is. So what can we do with this? Well, actually, no. Let's take a look at some more examples of SUI. This is Outlook. The contrast is not that good on this projector, but it's, yeah, it's Outlook. Here's another one that I like. I think a lot of you can recognize that. It's the Finder on a Mac. We know it's on a Mac because it has these 3 little dots, and the colors are very identifiable for the Finder windows on Mac. And here's the window equivalent. It's very simplified, but we instantly know what program or software we're talking about if this is included somewhere. So these graphics, they do provide the user or the person looking at it with some visual context of what's going on. We can use them to orient the user to that interface or to a particular workflow. We can also, in some cases, show the usage of a product without necessarily having to perfectly mirror the interface. And that's where it gets exciting, because the interface is always changing every time our developers are making a change. But if you're just staying close to it, gets slightly abstract, we might not have to make all those updates every single time they move a button a little bit or they rename a single feature that's not relevant to our particular workflow. Anybody recognize what website this is? Yeah, YouTube, exactly. So even if there's nothing on there that says YouTube, some of you, or most of you, I think, recognized it as being YouTube. Oh, and then last but not least, they look modern, they look clean, especially if you spend a little bit of time on the artistic side on working on them. And I think that's something we all can strive for, is content that generally just looks a little bit better and a little bit, let's say, sexier. I like modern stuff, right? Sexy content, but not in that way. Okay, so here are some more industry examples. So this is a welcome window in PowerPoint. They greeted me one day and they were talking about some new templates, I think, and they used a SUI graphic to represent that. Here's an example from Twitter showing, I don't even know what it was. And here is one in the latest Google News video. They used that same idea of simplifying these graphics rather than showing real news articles and pictures of authors, bloggers, and journalists to conceptualize the idea behind the new service. So you can focus on the idea and you're not getting distracted by all these little different news flashes that they otherwise could have represented if they had used a real screenshot of their app or of their service. And all of that is looking good. It's very informational, but where is the real instructional value? My background is as an instructional designer. So of course I want to teach people stuff and I want to make sure they can use my software and not just look at it and say, oh, that's nice. And let's first take a look at a classic screenshot. Nothing wrong with it, the instructions for connecting a mobile device to another software is go to the File menu and click on the Connect Mobile Device button. But the screenshot is also very cluttered. It's very busy. There are so many other text entries. There are keyboard shortcuts. There are more entries up there. So for the user looking at this, particularly a new user who doesn't quite know yet what is, what they're looking at, all of this can be very distracting. And if you compare that to SUI, it's much more clean. And the vital information for that particular workflow is right there. You need to go to File, and somewhere along that long list, click on Connect Mobile Device. The information we need to convey is available, but the user is no longer getting distracted by all the other alternatives. And these SUIs, I think, are most effective, or they're not that effective by themselves, but they need text. And all of you are technical writers, or a lot of you are technical writers, so I think you'll appreciate the fact that I appreciate text. But if you combine strong text with the SUI graphic, the user will have a lot of information, will have all the information they need to apply to the actual workflow. And when they take this information and they look at the actual application, they should be able to figure out that they can go to File, Connect Mobile Device to initiate whatever feature they're looking for. Okay, let's look at some more instructional examples. This is from Asana. It's a project management tool, and they have an integration with Slack. And they had a little pop-up, and it's it should start animating, fingers crossed, yep. Very little text, but we see it comes from Slack because they've included the Slack logo, and it was a bit hard to see, but they showed the one button, the expand, the option on the right side right here. Look for the Asana logo. And so it's not a complete instructional video or help topic, but as a quick introduction to there is a new feature, here's where you find it, this will serve the need for many, many people. And of course, you can click on Learn More and go to the actual help topic on this. Here's another one from Adobe. And so I have the German version of Illustrator on my computer, and there's an export of elements feature that at first glance is what the heck's going, like there's a lot going on. And they also chose to include right within the product little SUI animations that teach you, hey, grab an item, drag it actually right here into this window, choose some options down here, how you want to export things, and then choose export, and your stuff will be rendered out. So it's not complete instructions, but it's enough to give me as a user the context to know, yeah, okay, maybe that's the workflow I need to choose in order to use this particular feature. And it helps me, it's right there, it's effective, and I can go on with my job and export my various images. Now I want to show you an example of the work that our user assistance team, remember those guys? What they have done. So we have a feature in Snagit that allows you to do like scrolling captures. It's pretty neat, but it's not the most, there's some explanations in order on how to use it. And we could have done some screenshots or screen recordings in our tooltips, but they're also, again, a bit cluttered because, let me go back so you see that again. Because in this animation, sure, there's my face, there's a URL that's visible, there's street names visible in this particular example. It's not that clean and not that easy to follow on what you actually need to do. So instead, for this particular case, they chose a SUI graphic. And the SUI graphic looks like this. It gives them some text, it provides some helpful information or actual additional information, and it includes all the key elements that are important. Start, stop, make sure you scroll up and down. It's fairly easy for the user to follow, and I think it's easy for the user to apply to the actual software. And as I was saying, they're able to display additional information like capture complete or avoid selecting this type of area. Because the rest of the graphic is so minimal, the additional text actually pops out. But if you add additional text to a normal screenshot, it actually makes it sometimes more cluttered, more confusing, and doesn't help the situation. Something to think about. Another nice thing is, we were able to take that same animation, and we had to change the text, but beyond that, we were able to repurpose the same animation for another language version. And that was much faster than recreating that as a screenshot, as a short screen recording. So that was good for us as content creators. We were also able to take that same graphic and pop it over into our Windows version. So again, we're getting more life out of the same graphic. We can repurpose it in multiple instances. So the problems I talked about earlier, SUI didn't completely solve all of them, but it helped us get a little bit closer to our goal of better user onboarding and a little bit easier work for us. we also took this philosophy or this principle of SUI and we applied it to videos. So this is one of our other products, Camtasia. And if you open Camtasia for the first time, this is what you see. A lot of black, a lot of nothing. There's a couple buttons that draw your attention to them. There's some options on the left side, but for the most part, we did some user testing and a lot of people were just simply confused on what to do. And the last thing we wanted to do was like, oh, you just open the software, now go back to your web browser and start watching a video. But we wanted to give some contextual information right there and then. Very similar to what Adobe was doing in Illustrator. So we actually, right here in the preview window, we open a project that will play back, and I hope you can hear this, that actually, well, let me see if that works. Can we turn up the music? Maybe there's no music. It's all right if it doesn't work, then I can talk through it. Ah.
Check out the video tutorials on our website. Right now, we're in the Camtasia editor. The editor is made up of the timeline, where you can arrange and edit your clips, the canvas, which is your...
Okay, so we killed the audio because I want to talk about this a little bit. The interface we've shown here is, of course, very simplified. We're explaining the main parts of the software. The user sees it right in Camtasia, so they can look around and say, all right, this is what they're actually talking about. That's the actual timeline. These are the actual effects. And then in the next example in a second, yeah, let's just wait until that little test recording is done. This is how you stop a recording. And so then we talk about how to edit, how to trim the video. And again, we show very simply basic workflows that you can do. And this is the scene I wanted to highlight. We select an area, and then we highlight just the cut icon. But if you look at the actual timeline, there's a whole bunch of copy icon, paste icon, all the other icons that are confusing and so on. But because we only showed the little scissors, it was easier for the user to follow, yeah, this is actually the part or the feature I should be looking for. So that was another approach where we actually tried to take that principle of SUI and apply it to videos and add it directly into our software. And again, the same example SUI project we were able to repurpose for our Mac version and our Windows version and our German and our Japanese version with very little extra work. Some adjustments needed to be done, but it was much easier than having to redo it all as a traditional screencast. Okay, so again, the problems this time applied to videos. Yes, SUI helped with that too. So how do we create SUI graphics? It's actually not that difficult. Most of you can do it. What you need is some sort of image editing software. I've used Illustrator in the past. I've used Photoshop in the past. I've been doing a lot more with Snagit because I find it quite simple. And because in my process, I usually start with a screenshot. So right here we have, Microsoft Skype for Business. And I want to simplify that. So I open my screenshot in my image editing software. And as a next step, I use the shape tool and I draw boxes over the elements that are not relevant. And I keep doing that and I keep filling in more and more of the parts I don't need to have, but I still want to have them exposed or shown for context. When I'm done with that, there's also the selection tool or an eraser tool in all of these programs, and I use that to remove parts or things I don't need. So for example, there was some like helpful text I didn't need. Maybe I don't need these options, I can delete those out. Maybe I don't need the contact search text because it's just one more thing that might distract the viewer, so I can throw that out. But the little magnifying glass I maybe want to choose, so I move that over to the left side. And yeah, this UI or this graphic no longer, or the screenshot no longer 100% represents the software I had started with, but I think it's still recognizable to the user, and then I can use this as my base to actually start building out the actual instructions. And then I export it as a PNG or maybe another format. I was really intrigued by the talk about SVGs yesterday, so maybe that's something to look into further, because then you can do maybe even more with SUIs and text and all that cool stuff. So yeah, the future is bright. So let me give you some tips when you're creating these SUI graphics yourself. So for one is, if the software you're using has layers or groups, use them, name them, because it'll be much easier to keep all your different layers or shapes organized later on if you know which ones are which of these groups are what part of the elements of the screen that you've covered up. Then also always make sure, and this is true for all things in life, save a project file, so a PSD file, an AI file, a Snagit proj file. So in the future you can open the image file up again and you can start editing it again yeah, so you maintain that future editability if you have to make updates or small tweaks in the future and you're not starting completely from scratch. And then last but not least, what I really like is I don't really use the normal mouse cursor in my screenshots or in my SUI graphics anymore, but I have a graphic of a mouse cursor because, again, as a separate layer, I can always position it exactly where I need it. Saves me some time, and maybe it looks a little bit better. That's objective. But nevertheless, it keeps the workflows more flexible and easier. A few more tips. So as you're creating some SUI libraries, you're going to start building up a library of different assets. So one of them, for example, that we have by now is a browser. And because I have some of these assets as a base, I can easily build upon them. So it's pretty easy for me to create a SUI version of YouTube or a SUI version of the SOAP website, because some of that contextual application around it I already have and I can repurpose. And make sure you share that with the rest of your team for consistency and all that good stuff. But further, what our UA team was seeing is that our marketing team said, hey, those graphics are pretty sharp. Can we use them over in our marketing content? So now all of a sudden our technical content and some of our technical graphics are getting a second life and appreciation in other departments. And so this is just, they needed some abstract picture of some website, but they used one of our SUI graphics, or one of their SUI graphics, I should say, and you embedded that in one of our blog articles, and so on and so forth. So there is definitely value in SUI beyond just instructional stuff. Okay, so let's use SUI just everywhere, right? Solution to everything? None. It's not quite that simple, because it's not made for all cases. Yeah, but rather use it selectively where it makes sense. So I think scenarios are when it's within the context of the actual software as a little tooltip, so the user can look at your SUI graphic or your SUI animation and apply directly to the software that they're trying to use. You can use it maybe more in, if you're trying to do some onboarding, introducing a new feature without getting too technical, maybe those are some use cases. I've been seeing a lot more of these graphics pop up online. The more you start looking for them, the more you notice them. It's kind of scary. And I'd love to know what kind of ideas you have for using SUI later on. So come talk to me about that, or how you think these type of graphics could be helpful in the work that you're doing. Yeah, so use them selectively and effectively. After all, like we didn't switch over to SUI all the way. We're still taking 95% screenshots in normal screencasts. That's just part of life, and it's never going to change. But it's one of the tools we can add to our content strategy toolkit to see if we can make something more out of it. Okay, so to kind of wrap this up, so let's take another look at the theme. We want product-related content that is simple to author, deliver, and manage, and we also want product-related content that is easy to follow for our users. And the SUI graphics, I think, they're easy for the user to follow. I think, yeah, that probably makes sense. Delivery and management, okay, we can use one graphic and repurpose it a little bit more. But what about authoring? Because the steps with the screenshot, that was way more complicated than actually just taking a screenshot. And so, in the spirit of innovation, I want to show you a working prototype that the Snagit team has been working on. So this is not final. We're not sure if it's going to make it into the final version of the next Snagit, but I wanted to introduce it to you because the idea is, what if you had a tool that can actually recognize shapes on the screen and you hit one button and it turns that. Once you've enabled it, so this is actually working, I was playing around with this already, you can change some different colors, you can ideally define your color palette because you can use color to add emphasis to certain areas, so these pop out a little bit more. And then again, we need to expose elements that are actually relevant again. So what if we could, right here, do a right click and show the original, to reintroduce the original, so now the focus is right there. You have to wait a little bit, but we'll get to it. So, innovation versus simplicity, maybe, but I think I'd much rather have innovation and simplicity when it comes to creating content. So, and with that, I say thank you, and I'm waiting for your questions.
Thank you, Anton. Questions, you guys? There's one here, and I think one here as well.
Hello.
There.
Hi, I'm Pavel from Dolby.
Yeah.
So thank you for the presentation. It seems it's going to be working great. I have a question. You showed us how to create those graphics, but is there also an easy way to create those animations with SUI?
Yeah, so if we wanted to go into the whole animation creation workflow, we'd need probably another 20 minutes. But essentially what our user assistance team, these guys did, they created all the graphics and or recreated all the graphics and UI elements. I think they actually used Illustrator for that. And then they animated them in Camtasia by importing them as individual PNG files, importing the mouse cursor as an individual PNG file. So it did take a decent amount of time to build the first initial project. So it's essentially a bunch of screenshots or PNG files that back to back that are overlaid and animated together. But the benefit is for, let's say, localization, they don't have to do the whole recreate everything, but they just have to exchange the individual screenshots, for example, that show some text. Or if there's a software update, it's much easier to exchange a couple slides or a couple frames in a frame-based video or animated project like that, rather than recreating it. And I'm trying to get them to write some sort of article or white paper or something on the workflow for creating the animation videos that are based on SUI, but essentially create a bunch of images and then animate them afterwards to recreate the look of a video field or recreate the look of a video.
Okay, thanks.
Other
Okay,
questions?
we had at least 2 more questions. Okay, there's one there.
Hi, I'm Rafał. I'm right now.
Ah, yeah.
I'm here, so
You're not in the front.
yeah, I want to be funny. So I have a question because I will be. This is great, actually. I probably will use it, but as I said before, we have no technical writers, so we will probably use it as part of our automated processes. And do you consider to make some kind of API version of that tool or something like that? That can I use? Or my developers?
That is a question I need to pass on to the Snagit boss. So I'm not 100% sure, but we can definitely talk, and I can definitely introduce you to the actual Snagit team, and you can exchange more your ideas of what you guys are looking for.
It will be great.
Maybe they can make magic happen. So.
Yeah, you probably will have some many customers. So
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually trying to get Daniel Forster. He's the product owner for Snagit to come to SOAP this year and be here in my spot. So you guys know that there's more to TechSmith than just me. He wasn't able to make it up based on time, but I know he's very interested to hear more from the TCOM community in terms of what you guys are trying to achieve, what tools and features would be helpful. So we love your feedback and we love engaging with you. So yeah, let me know if you want to talk more with the team, and I can make that happen.
Why you are standing there. You have just sold the product.
Okay, we have one more question from Michał. You still want to ask it? Okay, you need to raise your hand because yeah.
Hi, I'm Michał. Have you actually measured how much time you saved by using simplified user interface instead of creating regular screenshots? Because as far as I can see, it takes some time to convert classic screenshots into simplified screenshots, and it's much faster to just take a classic screenshot and replace it. So have you measured this?
I don't think we've measured it exactly. I do know that the amount of time we're scheduling for the Getting Started project, which we used to create the animated video, we used to create unique for each language. And now the time has gone down, but I don't have exact numbers on how much time we're saving. But that would be, we're working on new releases, so maybe that's a challenge I'll put to the team, that they should really start tracking this a little bit closer to see what the impact could be of using SUI in certain scenarios compared to regular screenshots. But imagine with more languages and versions you're adding, the benefit will increase. And I think in a modern world, I think we're all moving to more rapid release cycles. New software is coming out not every 2 years now, but every 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 days. Some of you might be even faster than that. So the more the more content is getting updated or needs to be updated. If we can avoid some of that by using abstract graphics, I think the savings can be, should add up. But I'll work on some numbers, some real numbers.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
I think so too. I'd love to have them.
Okay, thank you, Anton, so much for your presentation.